that went dark very fast.
But now we're gonna get lighter, maybe.
Are we?
No.
Hey guys, in about a week, Ryan and I will finally be crossing the Atlantic on our sailboat, Keel. We've been preparing ourselves and the boat for the last 2 months. We've worked a lot, and in this video, we want to share with you some of the most important aspects of our preparation, which is to think about everything that could potentially go wrong and how we prevent it and what we would do if it was actually happening. So Ryan, why is it so important when you cross the Atlantic to think about all those things?
I think the big difference is that in coastal sailing, you're usually like a day or two away from help. So if something goes wrong with your boat or something goes wrong with somebody on the boat, you can get to help fairly quickly. When you're in the middle of the ocean, it could be a week or more before you can get help. So you need to be fairly self-sufficient and really think through all the scenarios before you go.
All right, so in these videos, we are going to go through a bunch of scenarios ranking from this is really annoying to we are really screwed, how we thought about it, how we prevent it, and what we would do if this was to happen to us. So things are going to get darker and darker as we go. Sorry, Mom. By the time you watch this video, we should actually have crossed already, so we should be fine. If you watch this, we're fine. Before we start, a little bit of a disclaimer. We are no experts. This is our first Atlantic crossing, but Ryan, you have a little bit of background in risk management from your pilot days, and this is the method that we've used to prepare ourselves.
That's right. I think most people who cross the Atlantic know that something is going to happen. They just don't know what is going to happen. So the best thing you can do is have good tools and know how to use them. Be prepared and know your boat, and then also know your crew.
Okay, so scenario number one of things that can go wrong is that we lose our water maker.
Not really a big deal.
That's not a big deal. When we cross the Atlantic, we are actually not counting on our water maker for our water supplies. So we've calculated that what we have in our tanks and what we have in bottled water, we bought those big 5-liter jugs, we should be okay for 3 good weeks, like even more if we ration ourselves.
Number 2, losing our sat phone or VHF. This is essentially the communications that we have to the outside world, and also not a very big deal.
Probably a big deal for our moms, because the sat phone comes with our live tracking. If we lose the sat phone, we lose the live tracking, and people can actually believe that we're in trouble. But for us, it doesn't change much. It's just that we're not going to get an updated weather forecast, which is okay because we're sailing in trade winds. It's just
not a big deal.
Not a big deal.
No.
Okay, now we're getting into the category of stuff that is annoying if that happens. And number 3 is if we lose our refrigeration or our ability to cook. So if the gas system poops on us, or if we lose our induction, that kind of stuff. Not a huge deal. If we lose our ability to refrigerate, we just eat what's in the fridge, and then we don't put stuff in the fridge anymore. And if we lose our ability to warm food, well, then we just don't warm food, and I made sure that we had enough food that can be eaten without being cooked.
If we lose our gas, we have the ability to cook on induction or vice versa. And if we lose both of them, we actually have a small camping stove. And if worse comes to worse, we just eat raw fish.
I think it's called sushi or sashimis.
I don't like it, but if I had to, I'd do it. Number 4, losing our freshwater pump. We need to have a way to get the fresh water out of the tanks and into the places that we need them, like our sink or into our cup so we can drink. On Polar Seal, what we've done is we have a backup pump. And if that goes bad or we lose our electric, we actually have enough piping to run the freshwater system to a foot pump, so we can manually get it out that way.
It's gonna be okay. Okay, now we're getting into the category of stuff that if it happens, it's actually, it's bad. So number 5 is engine failure. And that is a problem because if we lose our engine, it's not about propulsion, it's about charging our batteries. We have solar panels on our boat, but we also charge our batteries with the engine when the solar panels can't keep up with our consumption or when it is cloudy. So if we lose our engine, we lose a way to charge up the battery. It's not a huge deal because, again, we're sailing, we're a sailboat, so we can go places, and while we would just not use as much energy, we would start to really ration how we use energy on board, and I think that we could survive for the entire crossing. Okay, so number 6 is if we lose our navigation equipment, and that's two different parts. So there is the chart plotter where we have our charts, our course, and a whole bunch of information such as wind and direction and depth. And there is our autopilot. If we lose the chart plotter, we have redundancy. So we have paper charts, we have charts on your phone, we have charts on my phone. Basically, we're okay. If we lose our autopilot, it's a different story.
Our autopilot's going to act as our third crew member on this trip. So if we lose it,
it's really bad.
We've lost a crew member.
And because we have to hand steer. And that's... can do it, but...
it will increase the suck. So what we've done is we've made sure that we have a few spare parts for our autopilot system. We actually installed a full second autopilot system earlier this year. The only thing we did not install a second of is the drive unit. So that's kind of our signal source failure. If that drive unit fails, we lose our autopilot. So I bought a few spare parts for that autopilot drive unit. And the other thing is if we lost our electrical system, that would also cause it to go down, and there's not much we can do about that.
From now on, things are getting pretty dire. Number 7, fire.
Fire on a boat is bad.
Fire on board is really bad because it spreads really fast. Our boat is highly, highly flammable. So the best to do against fire is to not start a fire.
So we can have different types of fires. We could have a gas fire, we could have a diesel engine fire, we could have an electrical fire. And essentially the things that we've done to prevent that is to make sure things are installed correctly, making sure our wiring is crimped right, which I had to go back and redo, making sure our fuel systems and engines are running fine, and then also making sure the gas system has been serviced and all the piping is fine.
Also use it properly. Like, don't let food burn or let your gas run without paying attention to it. It's like common sense.
But if there is a fire on board, we do have a few things in place. So we have 4 fire extinguishers on board, including an automatic fire extinguisher in the engine bay and a fire blanket in the galley. And then we have a number of smoke detectors in each cabin.
Okay, number 8 is injuries, illness, or accidents. And there are various degrees in that category, ranking from seasickness, where you're momentarily incapacitated, but it's gonna be okay, to being fully incapacitated and in need of urgent medical care. Hopefully, we avoid the latter.
So what we did as a preventive measure is Sophie and I took a wilderness first aid course through Knowles, and that gave us a really good footing for how to deal with emergencies when you're away from a higher level of care. The other thing we did is visited with a doctor in Stockholm before we left, and he prescribed us a whole bunch of drugs, from antibiotics to pain medication to decongestants to stoppers and goers, if you know what I mean. And also provided us a pretty extensive medical cabinet, everything from band-aids to sutures to a catheter.
So if anything was to happen to us, the first thing that we would do is to call our doctor and then advise. But we're equipped to deal with medical emergencies.
The one piece of this that Sophie and I had a bit of a hard time talking about was if the absolute worst were to happen and one of us were to die.
Oh my God, are we going there?
Yes. So Sophie and I have had a lot of discussions. If one of us were to go, what do we do with the other person, or how do we handle that? And I think the best thing that we came up with was
call the Coast Guard.
Call the Coast Guard
like,
and try to work with somebody that has a much clearer mind than you do on what to do in the situation. But I think it's important to mention that you should, even though it's really morbid and dark, talk about it before you go. I know you don't want to talk about it, but we need to.
We did.
I know.
We did.
You dressed for the occasion.
I had that discussion.
You were looking like you were interested.
I think this is dark blue.
Okay.
Whew! That went dark very fast.
But now we're going to get lighter, maybe.
Are we?
No.
No, things are not getting better. As a matter of fact, they're getting super enormously sucky. Number 9, total electrical failure.
Why would this be bad?
Because essentially, we would lose at once everything that we've talked about so far. So no refrigeration, no cooking, no water pressure, no nav equipment, no nav lights, total darkness.
And the biggest thing we'd lose is our third crew member.
Oh yeah, the autopilot.
Our autopilot. I think really the only way this could happen is if the batteries failed or if we got water into the battery compartment. So we've double checked and triple checked all the connections to the batteries, making sure they're all good. They've survived the season so far, and it's just about keeping water out. If we do have an electrical failure though, we do keep a number of smaller batteries on board, and my company, Dakota Lithium, actually makes this cool power box, and it's got USB plugs and a 12-volt plug.
Shameless plug.
I know, some flashlights. But we use this thing a lot, actually.
Yeah, we do.
So we could plug in a few small devices. We have 2 of these 10 amp hour batteries, and we could probably run the autopilot for short periods of time, even with them, and charging them with the solar. So we're not out of luck. We have some things, but having a little power box like this just to run maybe some basic lights would be a good idea. And that's what we're going to take with us. Number 10. A rig failure or a total demasting of the boat. And what we do as a preventative measure is 4 years ago when we bought the boat, we actually had the entire rigging replaced. And then once a year, we always have a rigger come and survey it and check it out, retune it, make sure everything looks good. Then before long passages, I run up the rig with the help of Sophie and take a look at things like I know what I'm looking at. But I do. Just trying to look for things that look out of place. Loose bolts, maybe cracks in the stays or in any of the rig. See if something looks out of place or not quite right. On our Atlantic crossing, we're planning on running downwind with 2 head sails on the same furler. And we know that that's going to put a lot of pressure on the forestay. We know that because we've tried it already a few times. So one of our preventative measures is to put a extra forestay in place in case the main forestay breaks. And then the other thing that we're doing, as a suggestion from one of our riggers, is we have a piece of Dyneema that's cut to the longest length of stay that we have, and we have it rigged up so if something happens, we can quickly run up the mast, tie it up to the top, bring it down, and then tie it and hopefully secure the mast off before anything goes crazy. So this is another preventative measure. If something were to happen and the rig were to fall down, we have some tools to cut away the rig, and then we just got to get creative and rebuild as much of it as we can so we can keep sailing.
In number 11, things are not getting better because we are losing our steering. Losing our steering can be a few things. It can be that the cables have broken, or even worse, we've lost our rudder. If we lose the cables, we can replace them with Dyneema. If we lose our rudder, things are looking very dire.
That's right. We've heard of people using drogues to try to steer the boat or long lines to steer the boat, and that's had varying success from what I have heard of.
You could also try to build another rudder out of a pole and a door.
Also varying success.
It really depends on what conditions you're at, and well, I mean, there isn't much that we can do if our rudder falls off. It's not like we can bring a spare rudder on board.
The best thing for Sophie and I is prevention. So once a year when the boat is out of the water, we take a look at the rudder and see how much play it has in the bearings, and then also take a look at the control cables. Doing this allows us to get ahead of any issues we might see sneaking up, and if we have any questions in our mind about how the system is operating, we'll drop the rudder and take a deeper look at things.
Okay, in number 12, we're taking in water. What happens if we have a hull failure?
Not good. Fishing on the inside.
What?
We're going to be fishing on the inside of our boat.
There is very little that we can do to prevent hull failure apart from checking all of our seacocks. So when we were preparing our Atlantic crossing, we replaced a seacock and a skin fitting that we thought looked a little gnarly. But if we were to hit something, if we were to hit a whale, hit a container, which is, by the way, extremely rare, we would have to deal with the situation by either using some underwater epoxy or by like trying to fix the hull with some plywood, but most likely if we're sinking in the middle of the Atlantic, things are not looking good.
I think it depends on the size of the hole too. So for a small hole, if it was a small hole, maybe some underwater epoxy, a little bit larger hole, a plywood and some epoxy, and if it was really big, we just ditch. Number 13, man overboard. This is bad juju.
If someone falls overboard in the middle of the Atlantic, the seas are not flat, and chances are you will lose sight of the person in less than a minute. If falling overboard occurs at night, I mean, that's like your chances of survival. They're... On our boat, it is forbidden to fall overboard. If you go on our website and you look at what to expect when you sail with us, rule number 1, do not fall overboard.
Always keep a hand for yourself and a hand for the boat. Part of our prevention is actually making sure that we're tethered all the time. So in our last few passages when we've been offshore, we've actually been tethered almost all the time. Our rule is typically you're tethered at night, but we've been tethered almost all day long.
That's because we've been sailing in some crazier conditions.
Yeah, and I think we'll follow that same philosophy going forward because a man overboard is very bad. If a man overboard were to happen, we do have these MOB1s from Ocean Signal, and they essentially are an AIS that is activated if somebody falls over, and I think that's our best chance other than using our eyes to find somebody in the big seas. The whole point and our whole philosophy behind it is keep people on the boat.
And number 14 is the ultimate failure. And if that happened, guys, I don't think that we'll be here to tell you the story.
No, and that is a keel failure. So keel falling off the boat is essentially going to mean us flipping over in a matter of seconds. And if we're inside the cabin, we probably will have a very hard time getting out. So the best thing for this is there's clearly nothing we can do if it does happen. It's just going to happen. So the best thing is prevention, and that, again, when we've had the boat out, we've always taken a look at the keel to see if there's any weeping or water coming out between the keel joint, the keel and the hull, and also keeping an eye on our keel bolts to make sure they're tight and there's no corrosion or rust forming on those keel bolts.
When we're on longer passages, we have an habit of opening the floorboard at least once a day to check our bilges. And that's where our keel bolts are, and we're always looking at them. I'm not actually afraid of keel failure.
No, I don't think so. I think probably the bigger the risk is if we were to hit something with the keel.
Yes.
But it's such an extreme thing, and there's so little you can do. You just got to know it's there, and if it happens, get out of the boat.
Our goal with this video, guys, is not to scare you. Sorry, Mom. Crossing the Atlantic, the risks are real, but we believe that by talking about those risks and being open, we have a much better chance at preventing them from happening at all. We thought that not a lot of people actually talk about it.
Yeah.
So we wanted to do.
So do you feel prepared, Sophie?
Yeah, actually I do. It's been 5 months now. It's a long time that we've been thinking through every aspect of our crossing. And I know that things will happen. I am prepared for things to happen. I hope that nothing fundamentally bad happens. But I know that if it's the case, we have the tools and resources to deal with it. I trust you and I trust myself. So I think that we should do good. How about you? What's your biggest concern?
My biggest concern is losing the autopilot. I think that would suck. And we'd lose a crew member, and it would just really suck. So that's my biggest fear. That's what keeps me up at night. How about you?
I think that the autopilot is probably the one thing where we have the most single points of failure. So I think that's probably the most likely to happen. But my biggest fear is to lose the rudder. Because if we lose the rudder, we most likely need to abandon ship. And that scares me.
Yeah. But do you think we're prepared for them?
Yes, we're prepared for any eventuality, so now we just have to go.
Just gotta go.
If you're interested in the topic of risk management, you've done a podcast with Andy Shell on risk management. Yeah, it's a 2-part series podcast. I will put the link in the description below. It's super interesting how you translated your risk management
from
skills from aviation to sailing.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool. And you and Andy also have things in the works.
We got things in the works. Stand by for those. They're coming soon.
This week, I want to give a really big shout out to all of you guys who have used our Amazon affiliate link to purchase your things on Amazon. It is a free way to support this channel, and thanks to it, I was able to purchase those very fancy lavalier microphones, which give this video a much better sound than they normally do. So thank you so much for doing this. It was so awesome. This is the last video that we filmed before crossing the Atlantic, and I believe that the next video that you will see will be the start of our daily vlog. So stay tuned. Hopefully nothing bad happens. Guys, thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, consider taking a moment and click subscribe together with the little bell icon to not miss any of our videos. And in the meantime,
bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye. So how was your last day before departure, Ryan?
Stressful. It was stressful. I just have anxiety.
Are you looking at the weather?
Yep.